With the Senior and Shrine Bowl in the rearview mirror, who are some of the guys flying under the radar that we should maybe pay attention to? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive your $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Today on the show, I've got another guest. It's Kevin Fielder this time, a Shrine Bowl attendee. He actually went to both the Shrine and the Senior Bowl, so I wanted to talk to him about that. But also, Kevin is very much a guy that is like super plugged in to the smaller school prospects, the guys you maybe don't know about, but you're going to know about in a year, you know, when they actually hit the NFL. And so I wanted to get a beat on some of the sleepers, some of the guys that maybe we should be paying attention to. So that's going to be what a lot of this conversation is about. And there's no reason to dilly-dally. Let's get right into it. All right, everybody, here with Kevin Fielder, my resident small school and special teams guy. Mr. Late day 3 of the draft. You're my guy.
Hitting all the niches today.
Yeah, there we go. Also, Shrine Bowl attendee, both the Shrine and Senior, right?
Yes, never doing that again. Really tiring traveling for 10 days. Completely tiring.
Well, so I'll make half of your trip useless because we already talked to Tyler about the Senior Bowl, which will have gone out yesterday as people are listening to this. But I want to talk about the Shrine Bowl too. So give me some standouts. Who, in particular, like who's a name that I don't know about that I should know about because of what he did at the Shrine Bowl?
The easiest one to think of first is Middlebury offensive guard, interior offensive lineman Thomas Perry.
Going right for Middlebury. Let's go.
If you don't know where Middlebury is, I don't blame you because I had to look it up on a map.
Is that in Tennessee?
I think it's in Connecticut. I think
okay.
Because it is in the Northeast. I don't remember if it's Connecticut, Vermont. Truthfully, I looked this up.
Vermont.
It's in Vermont. Cool. This is a guy who was invited, and a lot of people went, okay, sure, show me. Then it later came out that he's a Duke Bennyweather trainee. And so
okay.
I think that sort of piques people's interest a little bit more because to Duke's credit, when he is right on an offensive lineman, that offensive lineman's really dang good at football. And look, man, this guy's awesome. This guy is like 315 pounds, maybe. He squats a ton of weight. He was listed on Bruce Feldman's. He did like a small school freaks list, and he was one of the first names. And this guy held his own against Jordan Phillips, who I thought was the best defensive lineman there. CJ West, who was the Indiana defensive tackle, who was equally as good. And this guy did not look out of place at all. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to find Middlebury all 22. Truthfully, I'm not sure if that exists. But if I ever find it, I'm really excited to go back and actually watch this guy play against people who are supposed to be at his talent level because he was awesome. Truthfully, that's what the Shrine game is all about, is finding that small school guy to me who was like,
yeah,
damn, man,
the diamond in the
really
rough.
Good. Yeah. And
that you need to see against real competition.
And as a D3 guy or as a day 3 guy, man, sign me up. Like I will figure everything else out. I don't know if he's a day 1 starter. I don't know if he's ever a starter in the NFL. It's really hard to predict some of these D3 guys because, man, you're only playing D3 talent. But the fact that he was able to go into Shrine game into a completely different environment and look like the best offensive lineman there, I'm willing to take a chance on it. Like everything else outside of that, I'm willing to take a chance on.
Amazing. And that's not the first that I've heard of that name. I don't know if I think that was like a guy that people were like, who's this Middlebury cat at the Shrine Bowl? And then it actually showed up.
I asked Eric Galco, the director of player personnel, the sort of leader of the Shrine
like the
game.
guy
He was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, man, that was all Duke. Duke told us about this guy and we knew we had to invite him off that.
That's kind of crazy that like a trainer. That's what Duke Bennyweather is. If you don't know, he's OL Masterminds. You probably heard of. He's a trainer that can just be like, here's a name, and get that guy like a boost to his career by getting him an invite to a privately selected bowl game. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, and like I think he may be the only guy in the world who's able to do that because he trains some of the best offensive linemen in the NFL right now. And he is located in Frisco. I think he trains at the Star occasionally. And so like he is sort of in the Shrine Bowl's scope. And I don't know. I don't think they went, okay, well, if you tell us to bring him in, we'll bring him in. Like they obviously have to watch the film and evaluate him. But the fact that this guy has now been endorsed by two people in the NFL draft circle in terms of Duke and the Shrine game, and he's looked good the Shrine Bowl, like sign me up. Like everything else, I'll figure out everything else. I don't know if he's a day one starter. I don't know if he ever starts, but like if he tests well at the combine, if he tests well at his pro day, sign me up.
We could be looking at like a Cole Strange situation. And who knows where the hype train like brings that. But so as this is fascinating because you went to both. So you got them both super back to back. And these are two events that are roughly, to me, they fall into the same category. These college all-star games, they're kind of for these like third and fourth round types or guys that are, you know, small school. You need to see better competition, but you are not going to see, you know, top 10 talent all over the place here. Maybe one or two guys, but this is not the combine. This is not the most prestigious. And then there's two of them. So is there like a difference between the two? Is there a, you know, Shrine is better for this and Senior Bowl's better for this? Or like, is it more that it's just kind of two versions of the same thing and they're in competition with each other because those two guys don't like each other very much?
First of all, they are in competition, and shout out to Arif Hassan for writing about this all on his page or on his Substack, and basically burning it, right? Like,
well, and that's a follow up to a piece he did a couple years ago about the rivalry between. It's phenomenal stuff. Like, very messy.
These two hate each other, and that tweet from Jim Nagy, I don't know if anyone saw it, the recalibrate your eyes tweet, that was directed at the Shrine game. I don't care what anyone says. Stuff. That was directed directly at the game. I think that there are certain positions that benefit from going to Shrine. And the biggest one to me is kickers and punters because you don't have to deal with the wind. Every practice is indoor. The game is indoors, right? Like you get to showcase your range. You get to showcase how far you can kick the ball. At Senior Bowl, speaking from experience, it was pretty dang windy there. I estimate probably 8-9 miles per hour wind. And
that's I never thought about that.
I don't know. Like I was talking to an agent who represents a kicker and he went, I don't want him here. Why would I want him here to miss 10 kicks? That does nothing for my client. That does nothing for me. That doesn't get him on NFL radars. But you take him to Shrine, you let him kick indoors, and he's kicking 55-yarders. Man, go watch the film if you want to see him kick in the elements. Like, if that's your big issue, go watch the film. To the other side of it, I think running backs benefit from going to Senior Bowl because the trench play is just significantly better there. And
interesting. Okay.
Running backs, look, this is not an event built for them. Practices are not built for them. A lot of it's one-on-one.
Like you watch them do ladder drills all day. Like
and like their team drills is like one-on-one. There's no tackling. You don't get to really showcase them breaking tackles. But if you want highlight plays, go to Senior Bowl for that. But to that same degree, if you're a small school guy and you want to get on a radar, man, Shrine's the place to go for me, I think, because you look at the history and you look at some of the guys who have impressed at Shrine Bowl that are now in the NFL or playing a significant role in the NFL. A lot of those are small school guys. I look to like Jalen Coker, who, first of all, his fan club, we should probably change that nickname. But in terms of like actual talent, man, this was a guy who
this is a family show, Kevin.
Yes, we will skip that. But like if we look at the body of work that he had heading into the draft showcase, no one was watching Holy Cross film. I'll be honest, as the small school guy who I think we coined me as Mr. Small School last time we were on this show, like I wasn't watching Holy Cross film up until after the Shrine game. And so that's the game to get him on a radar. To that same degree, right? Like if you go to Senior Bowl, but you just look like another dude, I don't think you're getting on a radar, right? Like there's a lot of guys who just get washed out because they're good, but they're not great. They're good. They're good, but they're not elite. And like the elite guys get the recognition. You look at some of the small school guys that are getting recognition from the Senior Bowl. Those are the guys who were the best of the best there, not just the good football player who did his job, right? But like
the guys that break the conference. Yeah.
But like at the Shrine game, you could just be a really solid football player and get recognition because truthfully, right? I think the talent discrepancy to some degree is a little bit more. There are some really bad players. There are also some really good players.
Yeah, guys you can kind of beat up on. And that's the deal. I talked to a whole bunch to Tyler yesterday about the Senior Bowl and how, and like these all-star games and how you can be a second rounder going up against an undrafted rookie in a one-on-one where it's a corner that doesn't have help and it can kind of lie to you. And philosophically, that's really interesting. And we can maybe get into some thoughts about that, as well as some of the other small school guys, whether they were at the All-Star game or not, that you want to put on our radar as Vikings fans. That will all be next here on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. If you are trying to get to anything, it doesn't have to be a Vikings game, right? Wolves are playing, Wild are playing, whatever event, you can get it with Gametime. Their last-minute tickets are unmatched. That is the place to go to get a sense for what the prices are going to be at. Go during the kind of hot resale windows. They can navigate that whole world for you and just show you the good deals that are up right now. They actually have a super deal, which is a prime seat for an absolutely insane value. And they'll be like highlighted. You can't miss them. They also have panoramic seat views and the Gametime guarantee, which means they will refund 110% of the difference if you find that same ticket somewhere else for cheaper, same row and section. So your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. So make your next event even better with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, you can go check out Kevin's pod. Sorry, no podcast today. Go check it out whenever they decide to put one out there.
It's kind of a brand at this point.
I mean, it's in the title.
It is.
But look, Kevin, I've been ushering you into this niche of being the small school, the special teams, and that's not because I hate you, which I do. It's because I think you're just really good at it. And you're great at seeing kind of an NFL projection in a world that's not an NFL field. And also it's just, there's nobody that I can look at and be like, hey, what happened on this kick that will have an answer for me? And I think that is just that's a place you can grow into. So I want to chase that. And tell me about some small school guys that need to be on my radar, whether they were at Shriner Senior or whatever. Who are the smaller program guys that are going to make it in the NFL?
We'll start with the first one, who I think is the easiest projection of any of them for me. And it's not Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall. It's not Darius Alexander, the defensive tackle from Toledo, who both had great showings at Mobile. It's a guy who I thought kind of got washed out at Mobile, and that's Navy safety Rayon Lane. The reason is because he is the best special teamer, I think, in the draft period.
Oh, let's go.
And this is a guy who's going to be a 10-year player at punt gunner. And I know that excites no one, right? Like that's like,
it excites you and me, and that's all that matters. Okay.
It's like but I try and tell people this. You want to win a football game? Go get a punt gunner who's going to tackle the guy. Go get a punt gunner who's going to pin him back at the 5-yard line.
It might honestly be like a market. This is a Bill Belichick thing, a market inefficiency he took advantage of for 20 years, that you can get that guy as an undrafted rookie. You can get that guy for spending nothing. The only cost is that you have to put a scout's time into it.
Yeah. And like, if you have a late 7th round pick, I tell everyone this, right? Like if I'm drafting in the 7th round, and I've got 2 7th round picks, if I've got a comp 7th, if I've just acquired a second 7th round pick, I don't get the value in spending that on a linebacker who can't play special teams. I don't get the value.
A guy who's not going to make the team.
Yeah. Like that guy's he's a camp body. I'll go get the punt gunner who's going to battle it out with my 4th wide receiver and my 6th corner and these other guys who I think has value in that role. And Rayon Lane to me is the guy who today, if I were projecting a guy who is going to be a day 1 starter for an NFL team, he's a day 1 starter on special teams. And I think he has value as a
7th round day 1 starter.
7th round. You're not getting starters in the 7th round unless it's a kicker, punter, long snapper, or gunner.
Yeah.
Or you hit the diamond in the rough of the draft. If you get the next
Yeah.
Brock Purdy, you get the
You
next Brock
can
Purdy.
kind of get Isaiah Pacheco running
Yeah,
backs, but
sometimes you get Isaiah Pacheco,
different.
but
Yeah.
you either get
But
Isaiah Pacheco or you get bust. Like there's no in between.
right. Or it's a guy who didn't make the team. It's, or, you know, you're hoping for like maybe a Nick Muse that's on your practice squad on and off, and like Jack Tocho style, like borderline guys. But okay.
Yeah.
So I want to hear more about this guy, but first I have a follow-up question, because this was a mailbag question. I recorded all out of order this week, so I literally just did this one. And it was, you know, like, tell me about the archetypes of day 3 guy, right? There's, you know, your high upside athlete. There's your guy who was good, but he got injured. There's your guy, you know, there's your player that doesn't have the right measurables, but good tape or whatever. And there's two that kind of go in conflict with me, for me. There is the flyer, right? There's the, you know, total freak, can't play football type of guy. But boy, if you just train him up right, and you get, like, there's that guy that always go a few of those in day 3 that are, you know, combine superstars, but their tape sucks and they're 20 years old, or maybe they're 23 and that's why they're available here. And then there's this guy is never going to be on the field for you, but boy, is he going to be useful for you in special teams and as the 52nd player on your roster. And it sounds to me like you are favoring the latter, this guy will contribute versus, but this could be the dude. This could be the athlete. Maybe it's Ivan Pace. And he just doesn't quite have the right thing. But where do you fall on that kind of spectrum, looking for upside versus looking for, however small, a little bit of value?
So I think the biggest thing is anyone I'm drafting on day 3, especially late day 3, I want them to have some sort of platform to play on special teams. And I look at Ivan Pace as the perfect example. First of all, his film at Cincinnati was awesome. And he was, the only reason why he didn't go drafted is because he was, I think, sub 6 feet and like probably, I don't know what he's listed at now, like 5'10".
He's built like a running back.
Yeah, he's built like a running back.
He's like 5'10", 220 some. He's like a bowling ball of a guy. Yeah.
But the other thing is you watch him on special teams, and he was the punt protector, the punt personal protector this year when Ty Chandler didn't do it. And I thought he did a great job at it. And I was talking to Florida's punter Jeremy Crawshaw at the Senior Bowl, and this is incredibly on brand for me. I asked, like, who calls protections out? And it's the punt personal protector. It might be the most important role on a special teams unit, because he's got to make sure where everyone is. He's got to know who's going to blitz, who's not going to blitz, who's going to be hot, who's not, like, to the same degree of being a center or being a running back on an offense, right? Like, he's that role. And if you can do that at a high level and you have upside as a defensive player, it may take 2 or 3 years to figure out, right? Like, that gives you a spot on a 53-man roster immediately.
And then you can figure it out.
And then, like, you get the opportunity to figure that out. I think to that same degree, like Bo Richter, he may never be a defensive player. He may only be a special teamer, but he's going to be afforded opportunities to figure that out because he's good on special teams. And so, like, if you're a high-flying athlete, but you've never played special teams, but I think I can find a guy who played special teams, but also has upside as a defensive player, let me take the guy who's got upside as a defensive player, but also played special teams.
Yeah. Like those, you know, super athlete, but needs, you know, athletic, but raw guys that are so athletic, but raw that they're available day 3 need time, and you need to buy that time. You need to make the team to buy time. This is what always got me about, like, Andre Carter. I was like, but how do you put that guy on the team?
Yeah, he doesn't play special
teams. How does he make the team? And there's always a couple of those undrafted guys that are like, ooh, but, you know, they're 6'4". So what is it about him? Like, so he's a gunner. What makes him a good gunner?
So for me, it's, first of all, it's all effort. You can be the fastest guy, you can be the strongest guy, you can be the tallest guy. It doesn't matter. If you don't show effort, if you don't find a way to break through tackles and you're not physical at the point of attack, you're not going to be a gunner. Like, truthfully, you can't be a gunner. And I think that's what makes Najee Thompson such a good gunner. I think that's what makes Trent Sherfield such a good special teamer, is their brain is always at 110%. They're never not playing at 110% on special teams. Like, they pride themselves on being a really good special teamer. And Rayon Lane might be a little bit smaller. He's still a really good athlete, and he's physical. And so he knows how to shed. He knows the technique of how to play punt gunner. The other thing is, I think he's just cerebrally one of the smartest players in the draft, right? Like, he went to Navy for Christ's sake, right? Like, most guys don't go to Navy. And he entered the transfer portal and could have gone somewhere else. He chose to return to Navy. And if you have the 3 categories I always look for is physicality, effort, and just knowing where the ball is at all times. The football IQ to know, like, the ball's behind me. Okay, I need to turn around and make a play. Or I know how to get back to my point of attack, my lane. And I could go for 20 minutes about this. I won't, because this is still a podcast. We can't go 20 minutes on this. But like, I think that, like,
We could go close. I wouldn't hate it.
If we have three things, first of all, it's like you have to be athletic. Everyone in the NFL has to be athletic, right? Like, I don't count that as a trait that a special teamer has to have, because everyone on a football team has to be athletic to some degree. And so, like, you have to be athletic, obviously. You have to have effort. You have to play like a junkyard dog who is just getting let out of the cage, right? Like, you have to. That's a guarantee for me. You got to be physical, because you got to be able to break through double teams, break through blocks, and be the first one down there at all times. And then third, you have to know where the ball is. You have to really understand everything. And it's like punt gunners, you can't just point and shoot. You can to some degree, but like, you can't just be like, okay, point and shoot, like, go downfield, because like, what if the ball is kicked poorly and you have to look up and figure it out, right? Like, so I think a guy like Rayon Lane checks all three, four of those boxes. And he's a guy who's going to be a day one impact player or starter to me. To that same degree, like Ricky White, who's going to be a popular name, blocked 4 punts at UNLV this year. That's my favorite part of his game. Great after the catch, wide receiver from UNLV, like, great player. But the fact that he blocks 4 punts for me, that gives him a career that other guys don't have. And so, like, if you have those things, to me, you're a punt gunner. You're a guy who can play special teams at the next level, and we can figure out everything else after that.
All right, Kevin, I want to get more names like that and dive a little bit more into the kind of the world, the rat race of making the team as one of these lower level draft picks, or maybe not even a draft pick. That will be next here on Locked On Vikings. Back with Kevin in a little bit, but today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to play daily fantasy sports. They have over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded. It's fun and simple to get in on the action. All you have to do is download the app, and if you use code LOCKEDONNFL, you can get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. And they even have a free pick for Patrick Mahomes this Sunday. If he throws 1 yard, you win. Feels pretty good to me. But if you want to throw that in, you pair it with somebody from the Eagles, and you're cashing out. For example, Saquon Barkley, more than half a touchdown. Okay, cool. We get 1 Saquon Barkley touchdown and 1 Patrick Mahomes passing yard, and boom, you're in. This week, you can look at anything from Travis Kelce's receiving yards to passing touchdowns from Mahomes or Jalen Hurts, whatever it is you want. You can even check out the promos tab if you don't have any ideas. They've got super sweet Millie winners. If you tail one of those lineups and go 3 for 3, you split $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Continuing on here with Kevin Fielder on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Kevin, you are working on a project. Can we talk about it yet?
We can talk about it, because I've sort of sprinkled it in on Twitter, on Blue Sky a few times, and I've talked about it a lot on the Discord. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So you are, like many, making a draft guide, but it ain't your grandma's draft guide.
We are not talking about Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. I don't want to talk about him.
No. Bama guard, get out of here.
I don't want to talk
SEC?
about
No.
No. Absolutely not. That's way too big for me.
Yeah.
It's a small school draft guide. It's the guys who sort of get forgotten. And the big thing for me is like, it's the don't forget about us kind of thing, right? Like, don't forget that we exist, right? Like, you're going to be the guy who's picked on day 3. You may never make an NFL roster. You may make an NFL roster as a special teamer. You may be the next Jalen Coker. Like, there is all these pathways to like make a roster as a special teamer, as a day 3 guy. And these are the guys who I think have the most interesting stories. They've got the pathways that can make it. And like, I want to be the one to tell that story, man, because I've covered small school football for years. I covered Florida Atlantic. That's where I got my start, right? Like, that's what I want to tell. And so I spent all of Shrine Game talking to these guys, getting to know their stories, talking about mechanical engineering and architectural engineering. We talked about building stuff with people. And so like I'm just excited to scout some of these guys and talk about some of these guys.
I am so excited for that project. I've wanted something like that to exist for a long time. So this is why I'm selfish. Okay. I want to see it. I want to pay you for it. So whenever that's available, you're coming back on the show and you're going to plug the absolute heck out of it. That's happening. You don't have a choice. And certainly the listener doesn't have a choice. We're going to talk about Sunbelt dudes and punt gunners more. But I would love to, as we get toward the end of the show here, I would love to hear you plant some flags on guys that, whether it's, especially like, are there any kickers or punters that we should look at?
Kickers and punters, small school guys, no. I don't.
Not necessarily small school guys either, but I guess we kind of did just do that. So give me another small school guy then.
Let's do small. I will say Ben Saul's Pitt kicker. Really interesting guy because he's a left-footed kicker. Not a lot of left-footed kickers.
Interesting
in the NFL. Not a thing that can hold him back though. I think that he's certainly a guy who could be a starter in the NFL, a kicker in the NFL. In terms of small school guys, Towson linebacker or tight end Carter Runyon might have the most interesting story. He was a former 315-pound offensive lineman who shed 100 pounds during COVID and switched to tight end at Towson. And I think he's a blocker. He's a guy who loves to block. And I talked to him, and you could see his face light up when he talked about blocking. He was a guy who's like, man, I love to block. I love to put people back. I love to play block. Like I love to block people. And so, man, you look at a guy who's going to make an NFL roster potentially. It may take a few years because he's still incredibly raw at tight end, and I think he's probably a practice squad guy to start. But man, if I could find a tight end who loves to block, man, there's not a lot of them in this draft, especially at the top of this draft. There's a lot of guys who are great receivers, though. To that same degree, Jackson Woodard, linebacker out of UNLV, former walk-on who went to Arkansas, transferred to UNLV. He's awesome, man. Like, he flies around the field. He doesn't want to come off the field. I think I've seen him play 90 snaps in a game before, it feels like. If I can find a
lot about those guys that like transferred from Power 5 out of Power 5, you know?
Yeah, but to some degree, I think it's a little bit different when you're a walk-on. He was a walk-on who just didn't get recognition, transferred, rebuilt his body at UNLV, was a team captain for multiple years, had tackles against Ashton Genty, who, like, I don't think I need to mention Ashton Genty as a small school guy. I think everyone knows his name. But, like, I like his game a lot. I think he's a really good pass coverage linebacker. They put him in on man coverage a lot against running backs, and he played well. Can do zone coverage, right? Is, like, solid against the run. I don't know if he's a 3-down guy at all in the NFL ever, but, like, to be a guy who can play on third down, there's not a lot of linebackers on day 3 of the draft who can play day 3 or who can play on third down, because like being a pass coverage guy is difficult to find at linebacker, especially as teams put less linebackers on the field, truthfully, right? Like the world of the NFL now is in nickel and not in 3-4 or 4-3. And so, like, if you
those
can be
off-ball classics is kind of a dinosaur.
If you could be an off-ball guy who can play in pass coverage, but also be physical against the run, right? Like, I think that there's a pathway for him to play, and that's the most important thing. My early draft crush in terms of guys who I think can be day 2, probably more of a day 3 small school guy is running back Marcus Yarns. I'll tell everyone to watch this guy. He was awesome at Senior Bowl. He's a rocket. He is
what school?
He's at Delaware. Sorry, I forgot.
Delaware. Okay. If you have tape, we should watch it together.
I have tape. I think I've got some tape. It may be a little bit more difficult to find now that I think about it, but I will find it.
Let's hop in for sure.
This is a guy who is athletic. He's got decent vision. He's patient, but not too patient, right? And like, I think if you're an athletic guy, I don't want you trying to dance around in the backfield trying to find the next like hole like your Le'Veon Bell. I want you.
Well, you already mentioned Ashton Genty, but
but like I want to be the guy who just finds hole, run through hole. If I'm fast and undersized, I want to find hole and run through hole. And like he's a guy who finds the hole and runs through the hole. Now, one of my favorite guys in this draft, period, because I think he is so funny, is Eastern Washington wide receiver Efton Chisholm. He was a late addition to the Shrine game. He practiced all 3 days. He was incredible in one-on-ones. He's another white wide receiver from Eastern Washington. So he's going to get Cooper Kupp comparisons from everyone. And he's aware of this. But also, This is a guy who wins in man coverage. And like the player comps are going to be Hunter Renfrow because he also won in man coverage. But like, I think this is a guy who can play special teams immediately, who's going to find a role as a third or fourth wide receiver. And truthfully, right, like if you can get this guy 6th, 7th round or as an undrafted priority free agent, man, we can find a way to figure all this out. And like, that's the most important thing to me. And like, I'm going to say this all the time. It's going to become a broken record. Play special teams. I'll figure out the rest.
Mm-hmm.
If you can play special teams, I'll figure out if we can make you into an every down player or a spot player. And I mean, that's how Ty Chandler built his career, right? Like he built his career starting on special teams, and now he is potentially the Vikings RB2 next year, depending on how things go, or RB3.
Yeah. And he's made the team despite probably not being that good of a running back. You know, like Jay Ward comes to mind. If we want to talk about Viking stories for this, right? Jay Ward has been a good special teamer, and it got him suited in a world where there was a first round safety that they probably would have much rather put in when they needed to for injury, when they probably would have rather given Lewis Cine some reps and tried to develop him and do that. But Jay Ward was the one who got in an injured time because he was the one wearing pads, because he was the one playing special teams. I mean, and you can't put Lewis Cine in because he's wearing a sweatshirt. Like that's where this whole thing comes up. And that sort of, I guess, has become the theme of the show, is the importance of special team. You know, special teams makes the team. If you're on special teams, you make the roster.
I think the biggest one, though, is Josh Metellus. This was a guy who didn't play until Brian Flores came around. The reason why he was on the roster and on a 53-man roster and on the practice squad is because he had value as a special teamer.
Yeah.
And now he's a every down player for the Minnesota.
He's making money. Like
he's making actual money playing football. And
and next time he signs a contract, it's going to be a contract. Like he's only upped his value, at least in the way the Vikings view him.
Yeah, and like maybe he doesn't find that role if he's never with Brian Flores, right? Like an alternate timeline if he's never in a Brian Flores.
He might.
Maybe he doesn't,
or he might play out the rest of his contract and go follow Brian Flores.
Yeah,
he could become a Van Ginkel type guy.
The truth is, like, he found his defensive coordinator who knew how to use the skill set, but he was on the roster because he was able to punt gun, he was able to protect the punter. He blocked kicks, right? Like he did everything you asked him to do outside of playing defense. And he did it with a smile on his face. And it sounds so cliche because like the NFL is never like that, but also it is absolutely like that to some degree, right? Like if you are a guy who like is eager to play special teams, 32 special teams coordinators are falling in love with you because they will like, I think we've talked about this before, Luke, right? Like there are certain roster spots that are dedicated to each position coach or each coordinator. The special teams coordinator may only get 1 or 2 spots where he's like, I want this guy in the roster. I don't care if he can't.
You probably only get 1 Najee Thompson.
Yeah, you may only get 1 Najee Thompson, maybe 2, depending on how the roster like figures out. I know the Patriots normally had like 2. I think you talk to a lot of these small school guys, I'll tell you the same thing. Man, I just need an opportunity.
Yeah,
I just need to
just let me get in with the SEC and Big Ten types. Let me show you what I can do. And maybe that means you get. And maybe that means you get smoked all camp long and you're the 89th player and you're cut, you know, in the first 10 seconds of cut down day, but at least you got your chance. And that's all you can ask for at this stage. Kevin, we are out of time. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rivals Fielder. You can find me on Blue Sky at Kevin Fielder. Those are probably the 2 best places to follow me. There's a lot of Kansas State stuff. There's a lot of small school stuff. There's a lot of tweets about cheese, because that's something I do now. I guess I'm the small school Ben Solak in the sense that I tweet about cheese as well.
Scathing. I couldn't have insulted you better myself. I'm just kidding. Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks a million, everybody, for hanging out with me this week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I will talk to you all on the other side. And as always, Skol.